Hello board game brothers and sisters, and welcome to the first opinion piece on the channel. This is going to be a two-part episode where I go over the top 10 things that I never want to see on Kickstarter again. I'll go over the first 5 in this video, and then I'll make a follow-up video that goes over the second 5. These aren't in any particular order, but if you want to see all 10, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll release the next one sometime next week. If you're new to the channel, my name's Adam, and it's great to have you here. And if you're new to Kickstarter, I think there's going to be a lot of really valuable info in this video that'll help you know what to expect and the different issues that you can run into with different campaigns. And I think just for everyone, I think this is just going to be a fun topic to cover, and I'm really happy to have you here. So let's jump into it. Over the course of these 2 episodes, I'm going to be going over 10 things that I really wish publishers would stop doing. And if you are a publisher, I really hope that this is an educational video for you and can help you do better on your next campaign. I am going to be giving examples and pointing out specific publishers, and I don't really mean to pick on anyone, but these things did happen, so I think it's fair to point them out. And I'm mostly going to be focusing on larger companies because I think my opinion is going to affect them less, and it is fair to say that they should be held to a higher standard. And I'm not saying by any means that these are bad publishers. I'm just going to be pointing out some different issues and decisions that they made that I think they can do better on. And with that said, the first thing I never want to see on Kickstarter again is lazy research. And this is definitely going to be a bigger deal for some people than others. And I think depending on the theme that we're talking about, that demographic is going to change. So every time you mess up on the facts of a theme, there's going to be a subset of people that are negatively affected by that. And the biggest culprit of this is definitely CMON, because I can point out several cases of this across several of their campaigns. So I'll start with Rising Sun, and there's actually 2 cases where they screwed up the facts on this game, and these 2 cases are still in the game today. So the first one I'm going to mention is sort of a minor one, and you've probably heard of this one. So a few kids in New Zealand were having some fun playing pranks on each other, and one of these kids decided to put the other on Wikipedia as a spirit monkey who is very hairy and gets engulfed in rage. And then he proceeded to add that character to the list of Japanese legendary creatures. And this friend's name was Kotahi, and you might be familiar with that name because it's probably in your Rising Sun box right now. This specific case doesn't really bother me, and it probably doesn't bother most people. It's actually kind of funny, but it is a little disconcerting to discover the extent of research CMON does is looking at Wikipedia. If you've ever done a school project before, you might find out that that's not a great way to get your facts. But as I said, this isn't the only fact that they got wrong with Rising Sun, and I think this next one is a much bigger issue, and that's that they completely screwed up the map of Japan. This issue doesn't affect me too much, and probably a lot of you out there are saying that it's not a big deal, and you don't need to get everything right when it comes to designing a game. And I definitely agree with that, but when it comes to someone's country, I think that extra care should be taken. But the amount that they got wrong on this map is actually pretty ridiculous when they could have just done it properly and it would have had no other effect on the game. The worst of these examples is that you have Kyoto and Kansai as 2 separate provinces, when one is actually a city inside the other region. I know if they made a board game called Canada and they put Toronto as a province beside Ontario, I'd feel a little disrespected that they didn't put in that due diligence to get it right. If this map was of the US, the different states would be something like California, Los Angeles, the Rust Belt, East Coast, Midwest, and it just wouldn't make any sense. So to appreciate why this is such a big issue, you sort of have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. But it doesn't stop there, because CMON continued to make these huge mistakes in one of my favorite games, Cthulhu Death May Die. And there's actually 3 cases that I know of in this game. And if you're unfamiliar with this game, it's based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Because this is based on a bunch of publicly available short stories, there's really no excuse for CMON to get anything wrong with this campaign. There's also a ton of people that have read the books and are familiar with the subject matter, so it really baffles me that CMON would actually get anything wrong. And the first thing that they screwed up on was some of the characters from the Dunwich Horror. And what they ended up doing is they mixed up Wilbur Whatley with his brother, the Dunwich Horror. And although they are twins, they actually look completely different. One is a half-goat, half-man monster, and the other one is an invisible blob of flesh that moves around town eating cows. Of course, this is a really popular story, and the community immediately pointed this out, and there's no way that CMON could have kept this in the game as it was. And they took ownership of their mistake and fixed that by giving the character the proper name. But CMON did not learn their lesson from this, and they continued to make this mistake, and this time they did not correct it. So something to note about H.P. Lovecraft that makes him such a historic writer when it comes to horror is that he redefined what monsters and aliens and different beings were in the horror genre. Before him, aliens and monsters always took on a humanoid form in different books and movies. He was the one that decided to take a step in a different direction and say, what if we couldn't even comprehend these beings at all? And that's why insanity is such a big issue in the H.P. Lovecraft works, because you're seeing creatures that are so fantastical that your mind cannot even comprehend them. These creatures are so foreign to Earth and our concept of reality that just gazing upon them is enough to lose your mind. Some of the more omnipotent creatures are so far from anything you'll find on Earth that a lot of them don't even have arms or legs or anything that you'd recognize on a living being. Some of them don't even have a body, they're just an indescribable color. That's the best story, by the way. One of these omnipotent creatures is called Yog-Sothoth, and this creature is normally described as a bunch of orbs and tentacles swirling around in space. This was probably one of the most incredible opportunities that CMON had while making miniatures for this game. I would have loved to see their take on creating Yog-Sothoth properly. But what did they do? They modeled it after the Dunwich Horror. And instead of owning up to it this time, they tried to defend themselves, saying that Yog-Sothoth can take many different forms, and this was just the form that they picked. Once again, the whole community knew that this was a load of BS because you can just look up the books yourself because they're public domain. I'll put a picture of the Yog-Sothoth mini that CMON went with on the screen now, and then I'll read straight from the book a description of the Dunwich Horror. Bigger in a barn, all made of squirmin' ropes, whole thing sort of shaped like a hen's egg, bigger than anything, with dozens of legs like hog heads that half shut up when they step. Nothing solid about it, all like jelly, and made up of separate wriggling ropes pushed close together, great bulging eyes all over it, 10 or 20 mouths or trunks a sticking out all along the sides, big as stovepipes, all a tossin' and open and shuttin', all gray with a kind of blue or purple rings, and God in heaven, that half face on top. That's how I imagine they said it. But if you could understand anything I said there, it was a perfect description of what that miniature shouldn't be. And I did mention that they got 3 things wrong in this game, and the third one is that the black goat in the woods is actually supposed to be a female. But since this is some monster from a foreign world, I can overlook that one since who knows what a female looks like in that regard. I am a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, so these issues do affect me, and I don't even want to use some of these miniatures because I know how inaccurate they are. Don't get me wrong, these miniatures look amazing, and that to me makes the problem even worse because now these inaccuracies are such a huge blemish on something that could have been absolutely incredible. To take the time to design and publish such amazing games and to pull together a team to create something so incredible, it's such a huge shame to see that they just dropped the ball when it came to their research. These issues did not need to be there, and CMON could have easily reached out to any subject matter expert that would have pointed these out immediately. Show us that you care and do that little bit of work to get these things right. And the second thing that I never want to see on Kickstarter again is dishonesty and half-truths. And this is actually something that a lot of campaigns are guilty of. And honestly, I do understand from a business standpoint why they do these things, but from an ethical standpoint, I really would love to see this stop immediately. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. I'm going to start with a fairly recent one with CMON, and that's for Marvel United. There's really just a few reasons that people back a campaign, and the 3 main ones are that you're either getting extra content, you're getting a discount, or you're getting it early. And CMON was very straightforward with this and let us all know under the retail pledge section that the retail version of the game would be released roughly around the same time as the backers receive their copies. It is nice when the backers get it earlier, but it is a very reasonable thing to do to release the game at the same time to retail. Never once did CMON mention 2-wave shipping or anything of the like. And if you checked out the timeline, you see that they plan to ship out around 8 to 10 months after the campaign ended. But then after the campaign ended, we discovered that CMON was actually delivering to retailers way before the Kickstarter backers, almost a year before. For a lot of us, including myself, we really didn't mind because the extra content added enough value for us to back the campaign, and waiting a little bit longer for the game was worth it for all those extra bits. But that doesn't change the fact that CMON was being very sneaky and dishonest with us, and I can definitely understand people's outrage. CMON did offer 2-wave shipping for those of us that wanted to get the game sooner, but this really should have been presented to us before the campaign ended so that people can have all the information that CMON had in order to make the best decision they can for them. And the second example of dishonesty is one that I'm really not cool with, and this was for Dungeonology by Ludus Magnus. I want to start off by saying that this campaign only offered 2-wave shipping, and they made that very clear by putting a little banner there that said 2-wave shipping at the top and listed all the shipping estimates for each country. They also spun this as a great benefit to all their backers. I did back this campaign, and the shipping to Canada was estimated to be about $15 to $30 US, But when I got done with the pledge manager, the shipping ended up being about 38 euros, which translates to about $45 US. It really sucks to pay that much extra on shipping, but I do understand that these things are just estimates, so I overlooked it at this point. I received wave 1 as expected, but then when it came to wave 2, this is where I really started to realize that this company was not being honest with us. It was at this point that Ludus Magnus decided to let us know that we had to pay $15 extra as a fee for the 2-wave shipping, which was the only option that we had. I'm very confident that they did not plan for this because the whole process of making this $15 payment was so ass backwards and convoluted that no one would have planned to do it this way. They also never mentioned a single time during the campaign that there was going to be an extra fee for this, or that shipping was going to be charged again during the second wave shipping. At this point, Ludus Magnus was holding your pledge hostage because there was no way for you to get a refund or to avoid paying this surprise second shipping fee. I understand that these estimates are tough to make, and with everything going on, I'm not surprised if the manufacturing or shipping ends up costing more than what they expected, but to just throw an extra fee at us and act like it was expected when it definitely wasn't is just the wrong way to do business. If you ever screw up like this, you really have to give your backers options and never hold their pledge hostage. That leaves such a bad taste in your mouth that I know me and many others are never going to want to do business with this company again. To add salt to the wound, they also added 2 extra expansions to try and upsell us while we went through this whole payment process. Don't do that again. And the third thing that I never want to see on Kickstarter again is not spending enough time on the rulebook. Creating a game with depth and decisions that give your players such an amazing experience is a beautiful thing when your players can actually play the game. There's a concept in game development called playtesting, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, and then blind playtesting. And the blind playtesting is really the area where you figure out if your players can actually play the game if you just leave them alone with the rulebook and components. It's not really a hard thing to do, you just need to find people that haven't played your game before, give them your game, and stand back and watch them try to play it, or have them record it and watch it later. And I am very, very skeptical if this was ever done with the Conan board game. I want to start by saying that I really love a lot about Monolith. They've been very honest with the community, and they've created a lot of great games, and they've even pushed the boundary a little bit with their attempt at Beyond the Monolith, which was really trying to redefine how we see board games. And I really want to commend them for their community involvement and listening to their backers, most of the time. But they really need to work on their rulebook. The rulebook for Conan was so bad that it made the game almost unplayable, and they did end up releasing a 1.5 version of the rulebook, but the same issues were there, and the game was still so hard to learn. If your players can't figure out how to play the game, it really doesn't matter how great that game is. I do want to pick on Monolith a little bit with this one because they ended up releasing an amazing campaign called Batman Gotham City's Chronicles, and this was actually a game based on the rule set defined by Conan. This was supposed to be the more streamlined and improved version of the game that everyone was waiting for, and those were some really pretty miniatures. As soon as backers received their game, they had to relive everything they experienced with Conan because somehow this game had an even worse rulebook. And then there was the next campaign, Batman Gotham City Chronicles Season 2. At this point, everyone was aware of the issues with the rulebook, and this was one of the first things backers asked about when the campaign launched. We also continued to ask about it throughout the campaign, and after the campaign. But Monolith never gave us an updated rulebook, and backers had to rely on fan-made rulebooks and fan-made reference sheets. It really baffles me why this rulebook was never updated with such a huge outcry from the community. I understand that updating a rulebook isn't free, but doing nothing is not an acceptable alternative here. You need to fix this now, and do blind playtesting until these issues aren't issues anymore. And the fourth thing that I never want to see on Kickstarter again is access to the pledge manager costing more than $1. And this might sound like a silly thing to complain about, but it is really important because it really tells us if a publisher wants you to back their campaign based on an informed decision or to back their campaign based on FOMO. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind a little bit of FOMO in a campaign. I actually think it's pretty fun, but it really matters how a publisher is handling that. If they're throwing in some components or Kickstarter exclusives as encouragement to up your pledge, I don't see anything wrong with that because that FOMO is actually based on something tangible. They're actually giving you something. And when you put a price on a a pledge manager. It's purely a FOMO play. And like I said, I don't mind FOMO as long as you're actually offering something tangible. But there's really only 4 reasons that someone's going to be backing a campaign at the $1 level. And the first one is that they just haven't had time to look into the campaign and they are interested in it and they want to back the campaign. But these campaigns are not cheap, so the $1 option makes a lot of sense because it allows them to look into the campaign a little bit more after it's ended without investing a huge amount up front. And the second reason is that they want to see all that content before they make that decision. Campaigns change a lot over the period that they're running, and there's new stretch goals being unlocked all the time and new updates revealing new information throughout the entire campaign, right up to the last day. So it makes a lot of sense why some people just want to back at the dollar level because they want to see exactly what they're getting into. And sometimes that value proposition just doesn't make sense to them earlier in the campaign, but they are interested in the campaign and they want to be involved with it, but they're just waiting to see exactly what they're going to get so they can make that proper assessment once everything is revealed, which pretty much forces these people to back at that $1 pledge. The third reason is that sometimes it's just so much easier. Pledge managers have a nice cart where you can see exactly what everything's costing you. And campaigns are confusing. There's several pledge levels normally, a ton of add-ons, and then you have to factor shipping into that as well, which is often different in the pledge manager than what it says on the campaign page. And that's really the only option you have to see exactly what a campaign is going to cost you. And the fourth reason is one that I'm just saying for fun, but if you're anything like me and you understand the time value of money, you really want to be putting in your cash as late as possible. These campaigns normally run for about a month, and then the pledge manager can be open for about 6 months or even much longer than that. And the longer that you have your money tied up in these campaigns is less time that money is spent working for you. You could be investing that money, or you could even just be using it to pay off credit cards or different loans so that you're avoiding fees, or even just having it sit in your bank account so that you maintain that threshold to avoid fees in your bank account. Like I said, I'm just saying this one for fun, but the time value of money is a real thing, so it's definitely something that a lot of us do consider. So all those points, minus that fourth one, all revolved around a common theme of making a more informed decision. And when a publisher asks for anything more than the $1, which is the minimum that Kickstarter allows for a pledge, it's really standing in the way of us making an informed decision. They're essentially asking you to put a price on that, and they're putting a price wall saying, hey, if you want to make an informed decision, you need to pay up to be able to do that. And that's just super disrespectful to your backers because these are people that are here during the campaign and they're following your work and they're interested in what you're doing. They just want to know that this is something that works for them. And publishers should want this to be mutually beneficial, and they should expect backers to back because they're offering a good product, not because of FOMO. You might think, well, how is this different than a late pledge? And I think it's very different because if you're pledging during the campaign, that $1 is going into that campaign and you're being involved in that campaign, following along with it, being part of the discussion, creating that buzz that goes along with the campaign. If you're jumping in on a late pledge, it does make sense to pay a little bit extra because you aren't involved in all that excitement during the campaign. And also, since you're jumping in at a later time, that does incur a cost to the publisher because that information that you want to back this campaign is more valuable to them sooner than later because they're already making decisions on manufacturing and shipping and order counts. This wasn't an issue that I really thought of before because most campaigns just offer the pledge manager access at $1, and it was just something that made sense to me and I never really thought twice about it. It wasn't until I saw Dead Reckoning by AEG show up where they were offering the pledge manager access at $5. And this is probably the smallest of the issues that I have with this specific campaign. That just makes no sense. And I don't really mind picking on these guys because there's a lot about this campaign that I have issues with. This might be one of the smaller issues that I have in this video, but it was actually one of the more harder ones to explain, so I hope I explained it well enough. I guess to summarize, publishers should really respect their backers and really promote them making an informed decision. And ask me to put more money in just for the opportunity to buy something that I may not be interested in on such a short period of time, it really just puts me into a position where I need to make a decision that I'm not comfortable with. And it really just rubs me the wrong way. So publishers, please just make access to your pledge manager cost $1 and incentivize us to back your campaign because it's a great campaign. And for number 5, what I never want to see on Kickstarter again is publishers launching more and more campaigns when they still haven't fulfilled a previous one. And a lot of publishers are guilty of this. And a lot of them you may not even be aware of because they have a parent company and some smaller publishing companies that are fulfilling campaigns simultaneously. And this has actually been a problem on Kickstarter before, and Kickstarter has stepped in and stopped this from happening several times. However, Kickstarter does not do this very often because a lot of these campaigns raise millions of dollars and Kickstarter gets a nice cut of that. At the end of the day, Kickstarter is a business and they're going to do whatever benefits them most. And this brings me back to a campaign that I pledged for over a year ago, and that's called Cthulhu Wars: The Demon Sultan. And the funny thing about this campaign is that Peterson Games has actually launched 6 more campaigns since that campaign ended. And what's even more funny is that the pledge manager is still open for this campaign. This makes me feel really awesome because I have no idea what's going on or if I'm ever going to get this game. Seeing all these campaigns back to back in such a short period of time also reminds me of that really great financial advice of paying one credit card with another credit card. At this point, I'm starting to get very concerned with what's going on with Peterson Games, and I respect Sandy Peterson a lot. I think he makes great games and the history this guy has is amazing, and I love his kooky personality. The updates that he does provide are always entertaining, and I do feel like he does a lot of work and does put a lot of his soul and personality into his work. But at the same time, if you try to do everything, you're gonna get nothing done. So you really need to stop doing everything and get done something. You really need to focus on those earlier campaigns and just get them out the door so you can focus on the next one. And after that, keep making great games and keep making those kooky themes and hilarious miniatures that you like to make. I want to see more from Peterson Games. I want to see more from the mind of Sandy Peterson. I think he has a lot of fun ideas, and you really need to just give your backers a little bit of confidence. But at this point, it looks like things are getting out of hand. And if that's the case, you really need to reel it in and figure it out, because I know the last thing that you want is to not deliver on a campaign or to lose your backers' trust. And I can promise you, you are losing their trust right now. And that was the first half of 10 things I never want to see on Kickstarter again. I do want this channel to make a positive impact on the board gaming space, and I created this video with the idea in mind that I want the community to be heard, and I want publishers to be aware of the things that we're not okay with. And part of the reason I decided to do this as a 2-part episode is because I want you to leave some comments in the comment section below letting me know of things that you never want to see on Kickstarter again, so that I'm not just saying the things that I've noticed, but I want to see things that the community has noticed and things that the community wants to see an improvement on. I do believe that publishers want this to be a mutually beneficial relationship. We need to respect publishers just as much as they respect us. It's not an easy task to design games, and even when a game comes out that's overpriced and too expensive, I'm still really happy that that game exists and that some people were able to buy it. But because these issues exist, I do feel like publishers have a little bit more free reign than us, and that our voices just aren't being heard well enough. If you think that this type of content can achieve something like that, then I'll keep doing my best in putting content out like this, and I would really appreciate any encouragement if you can help the channel in any way, whether that's subscribing, watching these videos, or sharing these with other communities that you're involved with. The more attention that this channel gets, the more of an impact we can make. Thanks a lot for sticking around to the end, and if you don't want to miss the follow-up to this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and you can also hit the bell icon to be notified anytime I post new content to the channel. That's all I have for you today. Until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.